"You're fired," my boss said 'cause I was 10 minutes late. Even though I had a valid reason. I had just survived a car accident. "Pack your things, you're done." No warning, no mercy. I cried. Until his voice cracked on a call he wasn't supposed to take, and IT all started to unravel from there. The screech of metal against metal still echoed in my ears as I hurried through the lobby of Vertex Solutions. My hands trembled slightly, adrenaline still coursing through my veins. The car accident hadn't been serious, just a fender bender, but it had shaken me up. I'd called ahead to let them know I'd be 10 minutes late, but no one had answered. I stepped into the elevator, trying to steady my breathing. As director of client acquisition, I'd never been late before, not once in my 3 years at the company. My perfect attendance record was part of what had made me a rising star. That and the fact that I was about to close the biggest deal in company history with Millennium Corp. The elevator doors opened to the hushed atmosphere of our office floor. A few colleagues glanced up as I passed, their expressions unreadable. I slid into my chair, sat down my coffee, and logged into my computer. One new email from Marcus Walsh, my manager. The subject line alone made my stomach drop. "Employment termination, effective immediately." I blinked. Sure, I'd read it wrong, but the words remained cold and clear on my screen. I opened it with trembling fingers. "Due to your failure to adhere to company attendance policies, your employment with Vertex Solutions is terminated, effective immediately. Please clear your desk and return all company property to HR before leaving the premises." The email was short, clinical. No mention of my spotless record, or the fact that I'd never been late before. No acknowledgement of the Millennium deal I'd spent 6 months cultivating, the deal set to increase our revenue by 40% this year alone. I looked up from my screen toward Marcus's glass-walled office. He was watching me, his thin lips curled into what looked almost like satisfaction. Our eyes met and he didn't look away. Instead, he gave a small shrug as if to say, "That's business." My chest tightened. This wasn't about being 10 minutes late. This was about last week's executive meeting where the CEO had praised my work in front of everyone while barely acknowledging Marcus. This was about the rumors that I was being considered for a senior position, maybe even his position. I'd noticed his growing coldness, the way he'd started excluding me from meetings, the subtle undermining comments, but I never thought he'd go this far. My phone buzzed. A calendar reminder. Zoom with Millennium Corp, 9:30 a.m. In 15 minutes. I stared at the reminder, my mind racing. The Millennium deal was supposed to be my crowning achievement. After months of building relationships, addressing concerns, and crafting the perfect proposal, they were finally ready to sign. The CEO himself had requested a final call this morning to formalize things. And now, what? Was Marcus planning to take the call himself? To swoop in and claim credit for all my work now that I was out of the picture? As if reading my thoughts, another email popped up. A calendar invitation from Marcus for the exact same Zoom call. He'd already removed me as the host and added himself. Something inside me snapped. I wasn't gonna let him steal this, not after everything I'd put into it. But what could I do? For now, I had no idea. I just clicked off my laptop and stared into the empty space. Then I began gathering my things. Pictures of my family, my spare blazer, the plant my team had given me after our first major win together. I worked methodically, ignoring the curious stares from colleagues who'd noticed something was wrong. Just as I was closing my bag, I heard it. The unmistakable sound of Marcus's voice through his office walls, unnaturally loud and strained. "What do you mean you won't proceed?" Marcus's voice carried across the now silent office. Everyone had stopped what they were doing, attention turning toward his glass office. I paused, my hand on my bag. "But we've worked for months on this deal." A pause. "She's no longer with the company." Another pause, longer this time. "A personnel issue." "Look, I can handle everything moving forward." Even from across the room I could see his face reddening, the vein in his forehead becoming more pronounced. "That's completely unreasonable. You can't just hello? The silence that followed was deafening. Marcus stared at his screen in disbelief, then slammed his hand against his desk so hard that his coffee mug toppled over, spilling across papers. I should have felt satisfaction. Instead, all I felt was a hollow ache. 6 months of work, relationships built, trust earned, all potentially wasted because of his petty jealousy. I slung my bag over my shoulder and headed for the door, head held high despite the weight in my chest. As I reached the elevator, I heard it, a scream of pure frustration echoing through the halls, following me as the doors closed. The lobby security guard gave me a sympathetic nod as I walked out, clutching my box of belongings. "Rough day, Miss Parker?" "You could say that, Eddie," I managed, forcing a smile. Outside, I stood on the sidewalk, suddenly directionless. 3 years of purpose gone in an instant. I pulled out my phone, considering who to call, when it buzzed in my hand. James Chen. "Emily," he said when I answered, his voice warm but concerned. "What the hell is happening over there?" I just had the strangest call with someone claiming to be taking over the Millennium account. I took a deep breath, fighting to keep my voice steady. I was fired this morning, James, 10 minutes after arriving at work. What? Why? Officially, I was 10 minutes late today. Had a minor car accident on the way in. I paused. Unofficially, I think Marcus felt threatened. The line went quiet for a moment. Then, well, that explains his awkward behavior. I made it clear to him that Millennium has no interest in proceeding without you. This partnership was built on trust, your trust specifically. A flicker of hope ignited in my chest, quickly followed by resignation. I appreciate that, James, but I've been terminated. There's nothing. Actually, he interrupted. This might be the perfect opportunity to reassess the terms of our arrangement. By the time I arrived home, my phone was lighting up with notifications, messages from confused colleagues, an email from HR with exit paperwork, and most surprisingly, 3 missed calls from Marcus himself. I ignored them all, focusing instead on brewing a strong cup of coffee. My hands had finally stopped shaking, replaced by a strange calm clarity. James's words kept replaying in my mind. Don't respond to anyone from Vertex yet, let them sweat a little. He'd explained that Millennium had been considering expanding the deal even further, potentially tripling its initial value. They'd planned to discuss it in today's call, a surprise Marcus had inadvertently ruined. My doorbell rang, startling me. Through the peephole, I spotted a courier holding a lavish flower arrangement. The card read, "A misunderstanding. Please call me urgently, Marcus." I laughed bitterly, tossing the card into the trash. The flowers I placed on my neighbor's doorstep, no sense in wasting them. My phone rang again. Marcus. Again, I sent it to voicemail. Then a text arrived, not from Marcus but from Diane Reynolds, one of the board members. "Emily, I've just heard disturbing news. Would you be willing to meet discreetly?" This situation isn't sitting right with many of us. This was unexpected. Diane had always been professional but distant. Diane suggested we meet at a small cafe 10 blocks from the office. When I arrived, she was already seated in a corner booth, looking remarkably out of place in her designer suit. Her silver hair was pulled back in its usual immaculate bun, but the creases around her eyes betrayed her concern. "Thank you for coming," she said, gesturing for me to sit. "I'll be direct. The board was expecting a champagne toast today, not a crisis." I remained silent, waiting. "Marcus told us there was a temporary delay with Millennium. He claimed you had a family emergency." She raised an eyebrow. Then I received a call from Patricia in HR about an abrupt termination form she'd been asked to process. I placed Marcus's termination email on the table, sliding it toward her. "No family emergency, just this." She read it, her expression darkening. 10 minutes late? After a car accident? She shook her head. "This is absurd. It gets worse," I said quietly. "Millennium won't move forward without me." James Chen made that clear to Marcus during their call. Diane's eyes widened slightly, the most emotion I'd ever seen from her. "How much do you know about today's board meeting agenda, Emily?" "Nothing. Why?" "Because we were supposed to announce the Millennium deal to our investors. It's already been factored into this quarter's projections." 2 days of silence followed. I maintained radio silence despite an escalating series of messages from Marcus. First apologetic, then offering a 15% raise, finally culminating in barely concealed panic. "You're putting the entire company at risk. People's jobs are at stake." I forwarded each message to Diane without comment. Meanwhile, I received constant updates from my former team. Marcus had called an emergency meeting, demanding they recreate my presentations and contact lists for Millennium. He tried reaching James Chen repeatedly, only to be blocked by gatekeepers who mysteriously had no availability. On the 3rd morning, I received an email from Vertex's CEO Robert Crawford, a man I'd spoken to perhaps twice in my entire time at the company. The subject line was simple, "Meeting request." The message was equally direct. "Emily, it has come to my attention that there may have been a significant error in judgment regarding your employment. The board has called an emergency session today at 2 p.m. Your presence would be greatly appreciated. Car service will be provided." Attached was a non-disclosure agreement for the meeting. I forwarded it to James Chen with a single question mark. His response came within minutes. "Perfect timing. Millennium's expanded offer is ready. Remember what we discussed? Know your worth." I signed the NDA and replied to Crawford, "I'll be there." The boardroom felt colder than I remembered, its floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the city below. 12 pairs of eyes tracked me as I entered, expressions ranging from curiosity to concern. Marcus sat at the far end, his complexion ashen. CEO Robert Crawford stood. "Emily, thank you for coming. Given the unusual circumstances, we felt a direct conversation was warranted." I took the empty seat, painfully aware that it was positioned directly across from Marcus. "I'll be blunt," Crawford continued. "We've received troubling information from Millennium. They're refusing to proceed with our partnership unless you're involved." His gaze shifted momentarily to Marcus. Can you explain what's happening? I placed a folder on the table, sliding it toward Crawford. This contains 3 things. First, the termination email I received for being 10 minutes late after a car accident. Second, documentation of the systematic exclusion and undermining I've experienced over the past month. And third, a statement from Millennium CEO James Chen, explaining why they won't work with anyone else. The room grew deathly quiet as Crawford read through the pages, occasionally passing them to other board members. Finally, he looked up. Marcus, would you care to explain why you fired our top-performing director without consultation during the most important deal in our company's history? Marcus's explanation was a master class in corporate doublespeak. He cited ongoing performance concerns that somehow had never made it into my reviews. He claimed the termination was already in process and my tardiness was simply the final incident. When he finished, Diane Reynolds removed her glasses slowly. Interesting, because I have here your performance assessments of Emily from the past year, all exemplary. She turned to me. Emily, what would it take for you to come back and salvage the Millennium situation? Before I could answer, Marcus interrupted. She can't just dictate terms after abandoning her responsibilities. I've already, Marcus. Crawford's voice cut through the room like ice. You've done enough. All eyes returned to me. I felt a curious calm settle over me as I laid out my conditions. First, I want a promotion to Executive Director of Client Partnerships, reporting directly to the CEO. Second, I want a compensation package that reflects my value to this company, specifically 20% of the Millennium deal's first-year revenue. Third, I want a public acknowledgement that my termination was wrongful. The silence that followed was profound. Marcus's face had gone from red to purple. Finally, Crawford leaned forward. Those are steep demands, Emily. I met his gaze steadily. So was firing me over being 10 minutes late. The board's counteroffer came quickly. Executive director position, 15% of the Millennium deal, and a formal retraction of the termination with a misunderstanding narrative for the staff. I held firm. 20% was non-negotiable. When I mentioned that Millennium was planning to triple their initial commitment, the atmosphere in the room shifted palpably. Quick calculations flashed behind everyone's eyes. Even at 20%, the company would still be making substantially more than they'd projected. Crawford called for a brief recess. As board members filtered out for coffee, Marcus approached me, his voice low and urgent. You can't do this. You can't just waltz back in and take my department. I regarded him coolly. I'm not taking your department, Marcus. I'm building something new, something you were too insecure to let me create under your leadership. This isn't over, he hissed. You're right, I replied. It's just beginning. When the board returned, Crawford cleared his throat. We're prepared to meet your terms with one condition. You must close the expanded Millennium deal within 30 days. I nodded, extending my hand. I'll need full access restored by end of day, and I'll be bringing back any team members who left because of this situation. Done, Crawford said, shaking my hand firmly. Welcome back, Executive Director Parker. The following morning I arrived at Vertex at precisely 8 a.m. Eddie, the security guard, broke into a broad grin when he saw me. Welcome back, Miss Parker. Heard the news. Couldn't have happened to a better person. The office was buzzing with speculation. My abrupt firing and even more abrupt reinstatement with a promotion, no less, had fueled the rumor mill to unprecedented levels. IT had already set up my new office, a corner space with windows on 2 sides significantly larger than my previous one. My old team was waiting inside along with 2 former colleagues who'd quit and protest after my termination. The prodigal boss returns, quipped Sam, my senior account manager, pulling me into a quick hug. With reinforcements, added Zoe, gesturing to the returnees. I smiled, genuinely touched. Thank you all for your loyalty. It won't be forgotten. I took a deep breath. Now we have exactly 30 days to close an expanded Millennium deal that will change everything for this company, and for each of us. As we began strategizing, I noticed Marcus through the glass wall, watching from across the floor. His expression was unreadable, but the rigid set of his shoulders told me everything I needed to know. He'd been moved to a smaller office, no longer a department head, just a senior consultant, according to the updated org chart. The next 2 weeks were a whirlwind. My new team and I worked relentlessly to restructure the Millennium proposal, incorporating their expanded needs and creating a seamless implementation plan. The deal had grown to nearly $30 million, more than triple the original estimate. Marcus, meanwhile, seemed determined to undermine me at every turn. He accidentally scheduled conflicting meetings with key stakeholders. Important files mysteriously disappeared from shared drives. Team members reported uncomfortable conversations where he hinted my position was temporary. I documented everything meticulously but chose not to escalate yet. I needed to focus on Millennium. On day 15, a breakthrough. James Chen agreed to sign the preliminary agreement, officially putting Millennium on the books. The entire office erupted in applause when the news broke, people stopping by my door with congratulations and relieved smiles. That afternoon, I received an email from Crawford. Board dinner tomorrow night to celebrate the preliminary signing. Investors will be present. Business formal. As I was preparing to leave, I noticed Marcus lingering by the elevator, his expression calculating. When our eyes met, he smiled, a cold, deliberate smile that sent a shiver down my spine. Something was coming. I could feel it. The moment I walked into the restaurant's private dining room, I knew something was wrong. The atmosphere was tense, conversations unnaturally quiet. Crawford approached immediately, steering me toward a secluded corner. "There's been a development," he said, his voice low. "Marcus has made allegations of client theft. He claims you've been sharing proprietary Vertex information with Millennium to secure your position." My blood ran cold. That's absurd. "I know," Crawford sighed, "but several board members are concerned. He's presented emails that appear to show you offering Vertex's client list to Millennium." "The emails are fabricated," I said immediately. "I've never—" "I believe you," Crawford interrupted. "But we need to address this head-on. He's planning to bring it up during dinner." I felt a surge of anger followed by clarity. "Does Marcus know that all our emails are backed up to a secure server administered by a third party?" Crawford frowned. "I'm not sure. And is he aware that Millennium records all their communication with potential partners as part of their compliance protocol?" A slow smile spread across Crawford's face. "Probably not." I nodded. "Then I say, we let him present his evidence. It'll be the last time he undermines anyone at this company." Marcus waited until the main course was served before making his move. He stood tapping his glass with a spoon to gain attention. "Before we celebrate prematurely," he began, his voice carrying across the now silent room, "there's a matter of serious concern the board should be aware of." I remained perfectly still as he outlined his accusations, presenting printed emails that supposedly showed me offering Vertex's client information to Millennium in exchange for securing the deal. When he finished, all eyes turned to me. I took a slow sip of water before responding. "Those emails are fabricated. I never wrote them." Marcus scoffed. "Of course you'd say that, but the evidence can be verified quite easily." I interrupted smoothly. "Vertex contracts with Secure Archive for email backup. Every message is time-stamped and authenticated. And Millennium, as many of you know, records all partnership communications for compliance." The color drained from Marcus's face. I turned to Crawford. "I move that we immediately request authentication of these alleged emails from both sources." Crawford nodded. "Consider it to Marcus. If these prove to be fabricated, the consequences will be severe." Diane Reynolds leaned forward. "I believe malicious falsification of evidence with intent to harm a colleague's reputation is grounds for immediate termination under our ethics policy." Marcus slowly sank back into his chair, the reality of his situation finally dawning on him. The verification results came back within 48 hours. As expected, the emails were proven fraudulent, created just days earlier and backdated. Marcus was terminated immediately, escorted from the building by security, while the entire floor watched in stunned silence. I felt no satisfaction as I watched him leave, just a profound sense of exhaustion. The pettiness, the jealousy, the wasted energy, all of it seemed so pointless now. With Marcus gone, the atmosphere at Vertex shifted dramatically. People spoke more freely, shared ideas more openly. Several employees confided that they'd been targets of his subtle sabotage for years, always too afraid to speak up. The expanded Millennium deal was finalized a week ahead of schedule. $32 million, the largest single contract in Vertex's history. My 20% commission alone was more money than I'd ever imagined having. At the official signing ceremony, James Chen raised his glass with a knowing smile. "To recognizing value," he said, his eyes meeting mine, "and to the courage to demand it." Later, Crawford pulled me aside. "The board is impressed, not just with the deal, but with how you handled everything. We're creating a new division focused on enterprise partnerships. We'd like you to lead it as senior vice president." I thought of Marcus's empty office, of all the needless drama, and smiled. I'd be honored. My first act as SVP was to review the company's termination policies. The existing process allowed managers too much autonomy and too little oversight, creating exactly the situation Marcus had exploited. I drafted new guidelines requiring HR and senior leadership review for all terminations, with additional protections for employees with good performance records. Crawford approved them immediately, sending a company-wide announcement praising the changes. My second act was more personal, promoting each member of my original team who'd stood by me. Loyalty deserved recognition. 3 months after the Millennium signing, I arrived at work to find a small package on my desk. Inside was a newspaper clipping, a profile of Marcus, who had apparently taken a mid-level position at a significantly smaller firm across town. There was no note, but I knew it was from Diane. Her way of saying closure was complete. That afternoon, during a routine department meeting, my assistant interrupted with an urgent message. "Emily, Globex Corporation is on line 1. Their CEO wants to discuss potential partnerships. Globex, Millennium's biggest competitor. James Chen had mentioned they might reach out, impressed by our work. I smiled at my team. Let's show them what we can do. The cycle was complete. What began with an unfair termination had transformed into something I never could have imagined, a powerful new beginning. 1 year later, Vertex had changed beyond recognition. With both the Millennium and Globex partnerships thriving, our stock had doubled. The client acquisition division I led had expanded to 28 people across 3 teams, each specializing in different industry sectors. My office now occupied the corner space previously belonging to Crawford, who had been promoted to chairman. My team jokingly called it the throne room, a far cry from the cubicle where I'd opened that termination email. The company anniversary party was in full swing when I noticed a familiar face among the guests. Marcus. He stood awkwardly near the entrance, looking significantly older than when I'd last seen him. Apparently, he'd been invited by an old colleague who'd taken pity on him. Our eyes met across the room. For a moment I considered avoiding him, then surprising myself, I walked over. "Hello, Marcus." He tensed visibly. "Emily, congratulations on all your success." "Thank you." A pause. "How are things at Raytech?" He shrugged, attempting nonchalance. "Fine, good. Different culture, of course. Translation, smaller, less prestigious, probably a fraction of his former salary." "I should go," he said suddenly. "I just came to say hello to a few people." As he turned to leave, I found myself saying, "Marcus." He paused. "We all make mistakes. The difference is learning from them." His expression flickered between resentment and something like gratitude before he disappeared into the crowd. Despite my success at Vertex, the memory of that termination email never fully faded. It had fundamentally changed how I viewed corporate loyalty, both to and from employees. This perspective led me to create Vertex's most innovative program yet, the Second Chance Initiative. We began actively recruiting talented professionals who had been unfairly terminated from other companies, offering them not just jobs but equity opportunities. The business press ate it up. "Wrongful termination turned corporate strategy," read one headline. "Parker's revenge, building an army of the underestimated," declared another. The reality was simpler. I recognized untapped potential where others saw only rejection. During a routine leadership meeting, Crawford announced his retirement, effective in 6 months. "And I'm recommending Emily Parker as my successor," he added to thunderous applause from around the table. Later in private he confided, "You know, if Marcus hadn't fired you that day, none of this would have happened. Sometimes I wonder if we should thank him." I laughed, but the irony wasn't lost on me. My greatest professional setback had ultimately paved the way for my greatest triumph. That evening, I received a LinkedIn request from James Chen. His message read, "Ready for a new challenge? Millennium is looking for a CEO." The offer from Millennium was extraordinary. Double my current compensation plus significant equity. "You transformed one company from the inside," James said over dinner. "Imagine what you could do if you were running the whole show from day one." I promised to consider it carefully, though part of me already knew my answer. Vertex had become more than just an employer. It was the place where I discovered my true potential and resilience. 2 days later, news of Millennium's interest leaked to the board. Panic ensued. Emergency meetings were called. Counteroffer proposals flew back and forth. I sat in my office watching the sunset paint the skyline in hues of orange and pink, thinking about that terrible morning when I'd cleared my desk with trembling hands. About Marcus's smirk as he'd watched me pack my things. My assistant knocked softly. "The board is ready for you." 12 anxious faces greeted me as I entered the boardroom, the same room where not long ago I'd fought for my 20% commission. "Emily," Diane began, "we understand Millennium has made you an offer. Before you decide, we'd like to present our proposal." She slid a folder across the table. Inside was a single page outlining their offer, CEO of Vertex, effective immediately. My choice of successor for my current role, an ownership stake that would make me the company's second-largest shareholder. My first week as CEO was surreal. The corner office with its panoramic views, the executive assistant who anticipated my needs before I voiced them, the subtle shift in how people addressed me, a new deference in their tone. But the most powerful moment came when I signed my first executive order, a complete overhaul of the company's ethics and termination policies. Every employee would now have direct recourse to an independent ombudsman. Performance reviews would be transparent and multi-sourced. No one would ever experience what I had. James Chen sent champagne with a handwritten note. "Wasn't sure you'd pass on our offer but admire your choice. Millennium's loss is Vertex's gain." I kept the note in my desk drawer as a reminder of choices and consequences. During my first company-wide address, I surveyed the hundreds of faces looking up at me from the atrium. So many careers, so many livelihoods dependent on the decisions I would make. "Vertex's future begins today," I said into the microphone, my voice steady and clear. "A future where talent is recognized, where ethics matter, where we lift each other up instead of tearing each other down. The applause was thunderous, echoing through the building like a wave. Later, walking back to my office, I passed the small cubicle where Marcus had ended up in his final days. Now it belonged to a bright young analyst on my former team. Everything comes full circle, I thought. 6 months into my tenure as CEO, Vertex's transformation was making headlines. Our stock had climbed another 40%. The Second Chance initiative had brought in talent that revitalized multiple departments. We'd secured 3 more enterprise-level partnerships using the blueprint I'd created with Millennium. I had just finished reviewing quarterly projections when my assistant announced an unexpected visitor. Robert Crawford, my predecessor, now enjoying semi-retirement as chairman emeritus. "Emily," he greeted me warmly, settling into a chair across from my desk, "the place is flourishing under your leadership. The board couldn't be happier." We chatted about recent developments until he finally came to the point of his visit. "There's something I've never told you," he said, his expression turning serious. "The day Marcus fired you, I was actually planning to promote you to the executive team." He knew about it. I had foolishly mentioned it during a private lunch thinking he'd be supportive. I sat back processing this new information. So he deliberately moved to get rid of me before the promotion could happen. Crawford nodded grimly. "He saw the opportunity when you were late that morning and acted immediately. By the time I heard about it, the damage was done." He paused. "I've always regretted not moving faster to fix it. Everything worked out in the end," I said softly. "Better than any of us could have imagined." "Indeed," he smiled. "Sometimes the wrong train takes you to the right station." The company gala marking my first anniversary as CEO was the social event of the season. Business publications covered it extensively, focusing on Vertex's remarkable turnaround and our innovative corporate culture. During my speech, I specifically honored the team that had stood by me during my brief exile, all now executives in their own right. Their loyalty had been the foundation of everything we'd built since. Near the end of the evening, a junior employee approached me hesitantly. "Miss Parker, I just wanted to thank you for the Second Chance program. Before Vertex, I was fired from my previous job for taking time off when my mother was ill. I never thought I'd get another opportunity in this industry." Her words touched me deeply. This, more than stock prices or favorable press, was the legacy I wanted to build. Later that night, scrolling through photos from the event, I paused on one that captured a candid moment. Me surrounded by my original team, all of us laughing at some forgotten joke. We looked happy, united, unstoppable. I remembered the crushing feeling of reading that termination email, the walk of shame as I'd carried my belongings through the office, how final it had seemed at the time. Now it felt like the first page of a much longer, much better story. I saved the photo as my new desktop background, a reminder of how quickly fortunes can change, for better or worse. 2 years to the day after my termination and subsequent return, I received a LinkedIn message that stopped me cold. Marcus Roberts had applied for a position at one of our subsidiary companies. Apparently, he'd been downsized from his last role during a merger, and had been searching for steady employment ever since. The hiring manager had recognized his name and flagged it for my attention, unsure how to proceed. I sat for a long time staring at his profile. The photos showed a man who had aged considerably in just 2 years, deeper lines around his eyes, hair noticeably grayer. My first instinct was immediate rejection. After all he'd done, the humiliation, the sabotage, the falsified evidence, how could I possibly allow him back into our corporate ecosystem? But then I thought about the Second Chance initiative and its core principle, judging people on their potential, not their past mistakes. Would denying him be justified, caution, or petty revenge? I finally drafted a careful response. Forward his resume to HR for standard evaluation. If he meets the qualifications, he can be interviewed like any other candidate, but he is not eligible for any management role or position with direct reports. It was a compromise I could live with. Not forgiveness exactly, but not vengeance either. Sometimes the greatest power isn't in destroying your enemies, but in showing them a better way forward. 5 years after that fateful morning when a 10-minute delay changed the course of my career, I stood on stage accepting the Industry Leader of the Year award. Vertex had quadrupled in size under my leadership, becoming known not just for our services, but for our revolutionary workplace practices. In my acceptance speech, I finally shared the full story publicly, the termination email, the fight for recognition, the tangled path that led to the CEO office. The audience sat in rapt attention as I described how that moment of professional rock bottom had ultimately launched me higher than I'd ever dreamed possible. Success isn't linear, I concluded. Sometimes the worst moments of our professional lives create the pivot points that lead to our greatest achievements. The key is recognizing that a setback, even an unfair one, isn't the end of your story unless you allow it to be. The standing ovation that followed felt like the final chapter of a long journey. Later at the reception, a young professional approached me with tears in her eyes. "Your story changed my perspective completely," she said. I was fired last month in similar circumstances. I've been feeling like a failure, but now I see it differently. I smiled, squeezing her hand. It's not about the fall, it's about how you rise afterward. And rise I had higher than anyone, especially Marcus, could have ever imagined.
Parents kicked me out for my spoiled sister's fake accusation. Years later they saw my success and demanded $20,000. As our daughter, you have an obligation to help us. So I agreed, but with one important condition. From my earliest memories, the contrast between how they treated me and my younger sister Katie was stark and painful. My name is Emily, and this is the story of how my own family betrayed me and how I rose above it all. Katie was born just a year after me, and from the moment she arrived, it was clear she would be the golden child. Our parents, Mark and Sarah Harrison, showered her with attention while I lingered in the shadows. Every milestone, every achievement, every moment seemed to revolve around Katie. I remember my 10th birthday vividly. While Katie had received a lavish party with bouncy castles and professional entertainers just months before, my celebration consisted of a simple cake after dinner. "We're a bit tight on money this month, Emily," Mom had said, though somehow they managed to buy Katie a new iPad the following week. The disparity went beyond material things. When Katie spoke at dinner, our parents hung on her every word. When I tried to share my day, Dad would often cut me off with a distracted "that's nice, honey," while scrolling through his phone. The weight of their indifference was crushing. But the most frustrating part was the food situation. Katie had a severe peanut allergy, and instead of just managing her diet separately, my parents enforced a complete peanut ban in our house. I loved peanut butter sandwiches. They were my favorite lunch, but I wasn't allowed to have them even at school. "It's not fair." I remember telling my grandmother Rose one afternoon while helping her bake cookies. "Why do I have to eat everything Katie eats? I don't have allergies." Grandma Rose was my sanctuary, the one person who saw me for who I was. Her warm kitchen became my refuge, a place where I could speak freely without fear of being dismissed or overlooked. "Your parents are making a mistake, sweetheart," she'd say, her wise eyes filled with understanding. "They think they're doing what's best, but they're not seeing how it affects you." I watched her measure flour into a bowl, the familiar motions comforting. Yesterday, Mom bought Katie new dance shoes because she said she might want to take lessons. But when I asked to join the science club, she said it was too expensive. Grandma Rose's face hardened. "I've tried talking to your mother about this, Emily. Just last week I told her she needs to treat you both equally." "But Sarah," she sighed, shaking her head. "She claims Katie is more talented, more outgoing. Says you're too introverted, that it's harder to connect with you." Her words stung, but they weren't surprising. I'd overheard similar conversations before. My parents discussing how Katie was the special one, the daughter with all the potential. Meanwhile, I was just there, the quiet one, the less talented one. The one they had to accommodate, but never really saw. While Katie's schedule was packed with dance classes, piano lessons and art workshops, I spent my afternoons alone in my room, watching life pass by through my window. "Katie has such natural talent," Mom would gush at dinner. "Her dance instructor says she could go professional someday." Dad would beam with pride while I pushed my food around my plate, invisible as always. But everything changed when I turned 12. Grandma Rose showed up one Saturday morning, her eyes twinkling with excitement. "Get your coat, Emily," she announced. "I've enrolled you in the Advanced Young Scientist program at the community center." That program changed my life. Suddenly I was immersed in a world of experiments, equations, and endless possibilities. Our instructor, Dr. Chen, didn't see a quiet introvert. He saw a curious mind hungry for knowledge. When I correctly solved a complex algebra problem in my one-stone week, he high-fived me in front of the whole class. By 14, I wasn't just excelling in science and math. I was standing at podiums, articulating arguments about climate change and social justice. People actually listened when I spoke. The shy girl who used to hide in her room was gone, replaced by someone confident, someone with opinions and the courage to express them. Emily's presentation on renewable energy was outstanding, my debate coach told my parents at a school meeting. "She has a real future in scientific research if she wants it." I'll never forget Katie's face that day, the way her smile tightened, her eyes narrowed. She wasn't used to sharing the spotlight, and my growing popularity at school clearly bothered her. The changes were obvious to everyone. People started stopping by my locker between classes. I was elected to the student council. Suddenly, I had friends who valued my opinions, who invited me to study groups and weekend hangouts. For the first time in my life, I felt like I belonged somewhere. That's when Katie started her whisper campaign. "Mom, Dad," I heard her one evening, her voice dripping with fake concern. "I saw Emily behind the gym today. She was kissing Tommy Martinez, and last week it was Jake from her debate team." I burst into the kitchen. "That's a lie. I've never." "Katie wouldn't make this up." Mom cut me off. "She's worried about you, Emily. These boys, these late-night study sessions, it's not appropriate." "But I'm just no more going out after 6, Dad announced. "And we'll be monitoring your phone calls from now on. It's for your own good, Emily." "What about my debate team meetings? My science club?" "You can participate in school activities," Mom said. "But afterward you come straight home. No exceptions." I looked at Katie, who was hiding a smirk behind her hand. She'd won again, and we both knew it. My newfound freedom was being stripped away, all because of her lies. As we grew up, Katie's antagonism toward me grew more pronounced. It wasn't enough for her to control my social life through our parents. She started targeting my belongings and the few friendships I'd managed to maintain despite the restrictions. One morning, I found my science project drenched in water, the careful calculations I'd spent weeks on bleeding into illegible smears. Another time, my favorite sweater, a birthday gift from Grandma Rose, mysteriously ended up with bleach stains. But the worst was what she did to my friendship with Rachel. We've been close since middle school, bonding over our love of biology and bad reality TV shows. Rachel was one of the few friends who stuck by me despite Katie's previous rumors, but even she had her breaking point. How could you? Rachel confronted me one day at my locker, her eyes filled with tears. Katie told me everything. How you write about Matt in your diary, how you're planning to steal him from me. Rachel, that's insane. I don't even have a diary and I've never... But Rachel was already walking away, leaving me standing alone in the hallway. That evening, I cornered Katie in her room. Why are you doing this? I demanded. Why do you have to destroy everything good in my life? You're paranoid, Emily, she replied coolly. Maybe if you stopped obsessing over me and making up stories you'd have more friends. I wanted to scream. Somehow she always managed to twist things around, making me sound like the crazy one. And our parents? They never questioned her version of events. Then came Katie's 15th birthday. Mom spent days preparing for it, determined to make it perfect. The house was decorated with pink and gold balloons, and relatives filled every corner of our living room. The cake was Mom's masterpiece. 3 tiers of vanilla buttercream, Katie's favorite. Everyone gathered around to sing happy birthday, and Katie blew out her candles to enthusiastic applause. But something was wrong. After a few bites, Katie's face changed. Her hand went to her throat, her eyes widening in panic. Mom recognized the signs immediately, an allergic reaction. The EpiPen, Dad shouted, already running for Katie's emergency kit. Mom held Katie's hand while Dad administered the injection, and gradually her breathing steadied. The party atmosphere evaporated instantly. Relatives huddled in concerned groups while my parents tried to understand what had happened. How did peanuts get in the cake? Mom kept asking, checking and rechecking her recipe. I was so careful. That's when Katie spoke up, her voice still raspy. I saw Emily in the kitchen earlier. She was doing something with the cake. What? No, I protested. I wasn't even near the cake. But Katie pressed on. Check her purse, she whispered, the blue one by the door. Dad grabbed my purse before I could react, and there it was, a small jar of peanut butter, one I'd never seen before, sitting right on top of my wallet. She could have died. Dad's voice boomed through the living room. What were you thinking, Emily? I stood there trembling as my parents hurled accusations at me. The jar of peanut butter in Dad's hand might as well have been a smoking gun. I didn't do it, I repeated, my voice getting smaller each time. Please, you have to believe me. Katie sat on the couch, an oxygen mask still near her face, but I caught the slight upturn of her lips. She was enjoying this, enjoying watching my world crumble around me. Our relatives shifted uncomfortably, whispering among themselves. Jane pulled her daughter closer as if I might try to poison her next. Uncle Bob wouldn't even meet my eyes. The only person who moved toward me instead of away was Grandma Rose. Now wait just a minute, Grandma's voice cut through the chaos. Everyone needs to calm down and think about this rationally. Did anyone see Emily put it there? This needs to be properly investigated. Everything is already clear, Dad interrupted. Emily, go to your room, we'll deal with this later. The next few days were a nightmare. At home, my parents acted like I was invisible. They'd leave the room when I entered, lock away all the food and whisper behind closed doors. At school, word spread quickly. People moved away when I walked down the hallways as if attempted murder was contagious. After 3 days of this torture, I couldn't take it anymore. I found Katie alone in her room, scrolling through her phone. You need to tell them the truth, I said, closing the door behind me. This has gone far enough. Katie looked up and the smile she gave me was chilling. You know what's funny? She said, setting her phone down. I've been planning this for months, waiting for the perfect moment. The birthday party was just perfect timing. Something snapped inside me. Years of pent-up frustration, anger, and hurt exploded. I lunged at her, grabbing her shoulders. We crashed to the floor, knocking over her bedside lamp. The noise brought our parents running. They found us wrestling on the ground, both screaming. She confessed. I shouted as Dad pulled me off Katie. She just told me she planned the whole thing. She planted the peanut butter in my purse. Stop lying, Katie shrieked, crocodile tears already flowing. See? She's crazy. She attacked me. That's enough. Mom's voice was ice cold. Pack your things, Emily. We can't have you in this house anymore. What? No, please. You're dangerous, Dad declared. We'll call your grandmother. Either she picks you up by morning or we're calling social services. I fell to my knees, begging them to listen, to understand. But their faces were stone. Katie stood behind them, and through my tears, I could see her satisfied smile. Grandma arrived at dawn, her ancient station wagon idling in our driveway. As I loaded my hastily packed bags into her car, she confronted my parents one last time. What you're doing is despicable, she told them. You're choosing to believe a lie over your own daughter. Someday you'll realize what you've done and it'll be too late. They didn't respond. They just stood in the doorway, Katie between them, watching as Grandma drove me away from the only home I'd ever known. Living with Grandma Rose was like finally being able to breathe after years of suffocation. Within a month she had legally adopted me, handled all the paperwork for my transfer to Riverside High School, and converted her sewing room into my bedroom. At Riverside, nobody knew about the birthday party incident or Katie's lies. I was just the new girl with good grades and a quiet smile. Slowly I started making friends again, real friends this time, who didn't have Katie whispering poison in their ears. I threw myself into my studies with renewed passion. Without Katie's drama and my parents' constant criticism, I flourished. My SAT scores were nearly perfect. I graduated as valedictorian, my speech focusing on resilience and the power of second chances. My parents didn't come to the graduation ceremony. I'd sent them an invitation, more out of formality than hope, but received no response. It hurt, but less than I expected. Grandma Rose's proud tears as I accepted my diploma meant more than their absence. I've been accepted to several prestigious medical programs, but the tuition fees were daunting. Before I could even mention student loans, Grandma Rose pulled out a folder. "I've been saving for this since you were 12, she said, showing me her college fund for me. "I always knew you were meant for great things." Those 4 years of dental school were intense but rewarding. I lived in a tiny apartment near campus, worked part-time at a cafe, and studied until my eyes burned. Through it all, Grandma Rose was my rock, listening to my excited phone calls about successful procedures, and never once doubting my chosen path. I had no contact with my parents or Katie during this time. Sometimes I'd see updates about them on social media, Katie's job at a local retail store, Mom's garden club awards, Dad's bowling league victories. I'd scroll past them quickly, refusing to let their lives intersect with mine. Finally, after years of hard work, I held my dental license in my hands. My first job offer came from Brighton Dental Associates, one of the most respected private practices in the city. I posted a photo of my diploma and license on Facebook, adding a simple caption, "Dr. Emily Harrison, DDS. Dreams do come true." The response was overwhelming. Old school friends, distant relatives, even my third-grade teacher left congratulatory comments. Aunt Jane, who'd pulled her daughter away from me at that fateful birthday party, wrote, "We're all so proud of you, Emily." Uncle Bob posted, "Incredible achievement, kiddo." Looking at those messages, I realized something profound. I'd done more than just survive my family's betrayal. I'd transformed it into fuel for my success. My phone rang on a quiet Sunday afternoon. The number was familiar, though I hadn't seen it flash across my screen in years. "Mom." My hand shook as I debated whether to answer. "Hello?" I finally said, my voice steadier than I felt. "Emily, sweetie." Mom's voice was syrupy sweet, the tone she used to use when asking Katie's teachers for deadline extensions. "We saw your announcement about becoming a dentist. We're so proud of you." I said nothing, waiting. "We've been thinking about you," she continued, filling my silence. "Your father and I, well, we'd love to have you over for dinner, just to catch up as a family." I shouldn't have agreed. Every instinct told me to decline, but curiosity, or maybe that stubborn little part of me that still craved their approval, won out. "What time?" I heard myself asking. The next evening, I pulled up to my childhood home in my new Mercedes. The house looked smaller than I remembered, the paint peeling slightly around the windows. I dressed carefully, designer blouse, tailored pants, the pearl earrings Grandma Rose had given me for graduation, armor in its own way. Mom opened the door before I could knock. "Emily." She moved as if to hug me, then seemed to think better of it. Come in, you look so professional." Dad stood awkwardly in the living room. "Hey kiddo." He'd aged more than I expected, his hair completely gray now, new lines around his eyes. "Is Katie joining us?" I asked, noting the table was set for 3. "Oh no. She's busy tonight," Mom said quickly. "I made your favorite pot roast." "Well, what used to be your favorite?" Dinner was a strange dance of forced smiles and careful questions. They asked about dental school, about my practice, about where I was living now. I answered politely but briefly, offering no openings for deeper conversation. "So," Dad said, pushing his potatoes around his plate, "dentistry must be lucrative?" And there it was. "I do all right," I replied neutrally. "She drives a Mercedes Mark," Mom commented, as if I wasn't sitting right there. "And you mentioned an apartment, Emily?" "Yes, I bought a place downtown, with a mortgage of course." They exchanged glances. Mom set down her fork with a sigh that seemed rehearsed. "Emily, we've been having some difficulties," she began. "Your father, well, the company downsized last month, and my arthritis is making it harder to maintain my full schedule at the salon." "That must be tough," I said, taking a sip of water. "We were wondering." Dad cleared his throat. "That is, maybe you could." "Have you asked Katie for help?" I interrupted. Mom's face fell. "Katie's struggling too. Retail doesn't pay much and she's barely making ends meet as it is." I placed my napkin on the table and stood up. "Well, I'm sorry to hear about your situation, but I won't be able to help." I heard them calling after me as I walked to my car, but I didn't look back. The message from Mom came during my lunch break at the clinic. "Emily, we need $20,000. Your father and I are about to lose the house. As our daughter, you have an obligation to help us." I stared at my phone, a strange calm settling over me. Finally, an opportunity. "I'll give you the money," I typed back, "on one condition. Publicly admit on social media that I never put peanuts in Katie's birthday cake. Admit that you threw me out of the house because of Katie's lies. Tell everyone the truth." The typing bubble appeared and disappeared several times. Finally, after what seemed like hours, her response came through. "We can't do that. It would destroy our family's reputation in the community. People would judge us. Surely you understand?" I laughed without humor. "Then you understand that I won't be giving you any money. Surely you understand?" The response was immediate this time. "After everything we've done for you." I turned off my phone and went back to work. 2 hours later, during my afternoon break, I saw Katie's name light up my screen. Something made me hit the record button before answering. Hello Katie, you heartless bitch, she snarled, her voice dripping with venom. Mom's crying because of you. They're about to lose everything and you're playing games? I'm not playing games, I replied calmly. I'm asking for the truth. I want them to admit what they did to me. What you did to me. Never going to happen, sis. You know why? Because it would hurt me. And they'll never do anything to hurt their precious Katie. Her voice took on a sing-song quality. They've always loved me more, you know. Even after I told them about the peanut butter. My heart stopped. What do you mean? Oh, didn't you know? She laughed again, the sound chilling. A few months after you left I told them I planted that jar in your purse. They didn't even care. Dad just said it was probably for the best that you were gone anyway. That's how much they prefer me over you. My hands were shaking, but I kept my voice steady. You admitted it to them? Of course I did. I was so proud of my plan I had to tell someone. And guess what? They didn't care. Each word was punctuated with malicious glee. They'll never admit it publicly because it would make me look bad. So you can forget about your little confession demand. The line went dead. I sat there staring at my phone, the recording safely saved. After all these years I finally had proof. My sister's voice admitting to everything, the setup, the lies, our parents' willful blindness. With steady hands, I crafted the Facebook post that would change everything. No dramatics, no accusations, just the truth, finally set free. Many of you remember the incident at my sister's 15th birthday party, I wrote. The day my parents kicked me out of their house for allegedly trying to harm my sister with peanuts. For years, I've carried the weight of that false accusation. Today I'm sharing my story not out of vengeance, but because the truth deserves to be heard. I detailed everything. The years of favoritism, Katie's escalating lies, my parents' blind devotion to her. I explained how they'd recently reached out, not to apologize but to demand $20,000 from me. And now, I wrote, I have proof of what really happened that day. Listen to this recent conversation with my sister. I attached the audio file. Katie's voice, clear as day, bragging about planting the peanut butter in my purse. Admitting that our parents knew the truth but chose to protect her anyway. The cruel laugh as she described their indifference to ruining my life. Within minutes the post exploded. Aunt Jane wrote a lengthy apology. Uncle Bob called me directly, his voice thick with tears as he expressed his regret for believing the lies. Even my old friend Rachel reached out, finally understanding why our friendship had really ended. Then came the angry messages from my family. Take that down immediately, Mom demanded via text. You're destroying this family. Dad bellowed in a voicemail. I'll sue you for recording me without permission. Katie threatened. I responded to them all with the same message. All communications are being recorded and archived. My lawyer has copies of everything. Any threats or harassment will be dealt with legally. Please do not contact me again unless it's through proper legal channels. They must have finally realized I wasn't that powerless teenage girl anymore. The messages stopped. The calls ended. The social media harassment ceased. Grandma Rose came over the night after I made the post, carrying a bottle of champagne. To the truth, she said, pouring us each a glass. And to you, my brave girl. I couldn't have done any of this without you, I told her, fighting back tears. You were the only one who believed in me when everyone else turned away. She took my hand, her eyes bright with pride. I never doubted you for a second. And look at you now, successful, strong, finally free of their lies. Do you think they'll ever admit what they did? Try to make amends? Grandma Rose shook her head. Some people would rather live with their lies than face the truth about themselves, but that's their burden to bear, not yours. She was right, of course. She usually is. My parents and Katie chose their path long ago, just as I chose mine. They'll have to live with the consequences of their choices, just as I built a life from mine. These days I focus on my practice, my friends, and my relationship with Grandma Rose, the one true parent I've ever known. The past doesn't haunt me anymore.